Hello dear crypto friends, and welcome to this brutal day of downward pressure for Bitcoin. What is happening? Why is Bitcoin dropping like a stone, going further down? We prayed to Chrome didn't listen, typical as always. Why is this happening? Why is the world so cruel to us? What have we done wrong? Let us try to find out what Bitcoin is doing and what this current price action means and where Bitcoin is headed, right? Let's not waste any time and start with the long-term Bitcoin chart. As always, we start with the weekly picture, and as you see, I have this logarithmic regression channel that I very often use, right? And I have drawn this white trend line, which I have shown in the last video. And what do we see, friends? What do we see here? Oh no. Oh shit. Look at this here. Oh man. It is breaking through this trend line. The famous trend line that has held once in June 21, another time in July 21, and then another time in January 22. And now it seems to be breaking to the downside if not a miracle happens. And if this weekly candle doesn't close today at night at around $35,000, then it's not looking good, friends. Then it's not looking good. And currently it's not looking as if this was the case. It's looking as if the weekly candle was closing below this trend line. So we want to know now, first, why is this happening? Second, what are the targets and what does this mean for the Bitcoin cycle? Third, do the cycles even exist, or did they even exist in the first place? Oh, these are some interesting questions that we are going to try to solve. So the question why this is happening is pretty easy to explain. We said a few times already that this is due to the dollar index that is pumping like a crazy maniac, right? This is the super long-term dollar index chart, and from 1968 until today, and we see that it is currently pumping for a few months now without pause, without any sign of correction. Now, of course, we know why this is happening. This is pretty clear, right? Because inflation is going rampant and the Fed thus has to start raising the interest rates. But on top, there's this crazy brutal war in Eastern Europe now, in Ukraine. What the hell, man? And now everything is looking even worse, and people are flocking into the dollar because the dollar is safer than other crappier fiat currencies. So this war situation has now made the dollar even stronger, and now people are flocking into the dollar because in times of crises, that's what people do. They flock into the relatively safe dollar, and that's why the dollar is pumping even more. Now, let's try to understand what this could mean for the future of Bitcoin, right? If we want to know what Bitcoin will do, we have to understand the dollar index on a fundamental level. This is something which I don't know if other channels are doing it, but I'm focusing a lot on the connection between Bitcoin and therefore the whole of the crypto market, because we know all altcoins are following Bitcoin, between Bitcoin and the dollar index and the stock market, because the correlation is getting stronger and stronger, okay? There's a very strong correlation between Bitcoin and the dollar index and the stock market. It's anti-correlated to the dollar index and positively correlated to the stock market. Now, if you look at the long-term dollar chart, right? What do we see? Well, we see that it has been making lower lows, right? But the tops were kind of like in a falling wedge pattern. Kind of like a falling wedge, right? And if we look at this long-term behavior, what do we see? Well, we see that there is a bullish divergence. There was a multi-year bullish divergence in this super cycle. Let's call it the dollar super cycle, right? And what does this mean? Like, the RSI is making higher lows. Look at this. The RSI has been printing higher lows since the 70s, whereas the price is making lower lows. And friends, what is this? This is a bullish divergence. That's right. This is a bullish divergence in the RSI on a super long-term dollar chart. That is freaking crazy. I don't know why no one is talking about this, but everyone told us the dollar is imploding, the end of the dollar, the American Empire is imploding. The American Empire is like Rome in the 5th century, shortly before collapse. And what is happening now? The dollar is pumping like crazy and is reaching values that haven't been reached since 20 years now. So the dollar is stronger and more vital than we would have liked to believe, but it was apparently all the time in the charts. We just didn't want to look. We just didn't want to admit that the USA is still insanely powerful and the dollar is still insanely powerful. We just didn't want to admit it. And now we would like to know what is happening. So we can see that this whole behavior of the dollar since 1985, right? It had a peak in 1985. This whole thing could be seen as a A, B, C type correction, and then we go to new highs, friends. We go to new highs. That could really mean, if we are unlucky, that the dollar is breaking this resistance line that I was showing, this line here at 103.8 or 104, and we go to values that haven't been seen since 20 years now, since 20 years. And if we look at this rally, okay, if we look at this current rally and compare it to this here with a bit of fantasy, I will show you now something which you have seen nowhere else, friends, which you see nowhere else, only on this channel. Only on this channel will you see such things, because I have nothing to do apparently in my life and think about this weird stuff, and then I come up with completely bizarre theories that sometimes are absolutely wrong, but in 1% of cases even turn out to be right by some lucky coincidence. So what I was thinking is that this whole rally here that you see, right? This whole rally here is just what we are reliving now, but in a slowed down form. In a slowed down form. So what do I mean by that? I meant by that, if I look at this whole corrective structure, I felt very much reminded, this whole thing here did remind me of this area here, right? We have a breakout, right? And then it's wobbling around, and then it might go to new highs. And if I overlay this, it looks interestingly similar, right? It looks interestingly similar. So I do overlay this like this, right? Of course, it's not 100% perfect, but you can see that there is some kind of similarity, right? It goes up, right? Goes down again, goes up, then goes down, goes up, and here it goes down, and now we're going up again. And if this trend continues like this, then we will reach the top by the end of the year in the dollar index at around 107 or 107.5. And then we see a correction, and then we go to even higher values in the dollar index. Now, if this would happen, okay, if this would happen, what would this mean for Bitcoin? Well, this would mean the following. We are here right now, and if this continues to follow this pattern, then this means, friends, this means that we will not see anything useful from Bitcoin for the whole freaking year. This means that Bitcoin will be in a bear market for this whole year 2022, and then only in 2023 we see that the dollar index, if it continues this rally, if it continues this pattern, would start dumping in January 2023, right? Like this year. In January 2023, it would then dump from 107.7 down to 95 in September 2023, right? So this would mean that the dollar would dump for 9 months. For 9 months from early 2023 or late December 2022 until September or October 2023, right? So this is kind of a fascinating theory. And if this holds to be true, like if the dollar follows this scenario and reaches values that haven't been seen since the 80s, right? If this happens, then friends, this, I'm sorry to say this, means that we will revisit much lower values in Bitcoin, and the important trend line here that has been in place since quite a while now seems to be breaking right now as we speak. If a miracle doesn't happen, and I think it won't happen, then we will go lower. We could still, like, the only thing we could hope for is that we get an expanded flat correction, okay? So I was having the theory for a while now that we are in a running flat correction. So a running flat, you come from down and then it wobbles around and then goes higher, right? This would have been a running flat correction. But apparently we are now, if we are closing below this line, not in a running flat correction anymore, right? We are not in a running flat correction anymore as it appears. Now, if we are lucky, we could get an expanded flat. An expanded flat means that we get an A, B, C type move, right? A, B, C, and the C is lower than the A. But it's not much lower, okay? It's not super much lower. So this would mean we go to values in the 20,000s, 25, 26,000, something like that. And then we go into a rally type of situation. But of course, this could only happen if the dollar index dumps. And as we have seen now, if my dollar index theory, my super long-term, super cycle dollar index theory holds true, then the dollar index could be in a new huge pump cycle, which could last for many years. And then we would see this intermediate dump in the dollar index, as I said, only starting later this year or early next year. And then in 2023, it would be a nice year. In 2023, we would have pumps from January until September or October 2023 with pretty nice gains, I suppose. But until then, if this theory is true, I think if we are really unlucky and the dollar index continues pumping, then friends, I wouldn't even bet on the expanded flat. I think we might go down to the MA200, the weekly moving average 200, the blue line here. It has been held, it has been acting as support historically since twice in 2015, then again in 2018, then in the COVID low again, and here it might act again as support. I have also drawn the MA290, the 290 weekly moving average, because it has been hit, as we can see in the Corona low. It went down to this super insane green support band given by the 290 weekly moving average, which now sits at 16,500. So until we reach that value, it might creep up to 17 or 18,000. We might go down here, wobble around. And then I said in 2023, right? I said in early 2023, we will get the next pump. So here in 2023, we will get the next pump and we could get lucky and go and revisit the upper areas of this long-term trend channel, right? This is how it could play out. This is what we could expect if my dollar index theory holds true. This is currently a theory, right? Nobody knows what will happen, friends, and I'm just thinking about stuff and telling you my current thoughts, but this doesn't mean that my current thoughts are always super awesome and right and amazing. They could be crap thoughts. Just be aware of it. I will just tell you what I'm thinking, and maybe you find this information useful or maybe you don't, but I will still say it anyway because, hey, I want to share my thoughts and my thinking process, and maybe you find something interesting out of that. Maybe you find something interesting. So this is my current view. The dollar index, as we said, let's go back to the dollar index. The dollar index, as I said, is in this super long-term structure. Let me deactivate the stuff here. So if we are unlucky, the dollar index is in a new super cycle, and this super long-term bullish divergence in the RSI certainly seems to indicate it. And also this quite fascinating similarity of this area here where we're in now with this area here also is quite fascinating. So there is a certain possibility that this happens. So if we get to see new all-time highs in the dollar index that we haven't seen since the 80s, then friends, we must hope on such an intermediate correction. We must hope that the dollar index will dump, and that is the time when Bitcoin will see the pump. Because if we remove this bar here, let's remove this. Let's go into the dollar index. Look, last time we got this dump here, March 2020 until January 2021, this was exactly the time when Bitcoin was pumping like crazy. Before that, friends, 2017, the whole year 2017, that was exactly when we had the bull cycle in 2017, right? And this was the case always even since Bitcoin started trading. Like look at this year, 2010 to 2011. This was also a huge Bitcoin rally. And I'm fascinated because what if the 4-year cycle, friends, was never a 4-year Bitcoin cycle, but a 4-year dollar dump cycle? What if the 4-year Bitcoin cycle never existed? What if this always was about the dollar? What if the Bitcoin cycles are not given by the halvings and the halving has less and less of an impact? Let's be realistic. The halving was super important in the early days, but now the halving is less and less important because most of the coins are circulating and have already been mined. So the halving impact will diminish more and more. So what if this whole time the dollar index has actually been responsible for the Bitcoin cycles? Think about it. Think about it. This is a fascinating theory. I'm not sure if it is correct, but we certainly do see that the dollar has a cyclical behavior. It also does cycles, right? It also does cycles, right? Cycle, 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 right? And this has an impact on Bitcoin, as we saw. And if we now go to new highs here in the dollar index, we must really hope that, as we said, we get this dump starting by the end of the year. If we reach values of about 107, we said 107.5, right? And then we dump, we have an intermediate dump until October 23, and then we continue to higher values, right? That is what would happen if we would now be here, right? We would now be here, and this whole thing would be this thing. So this would be this intermediate dump until we go to new highs. This is my current theory of what could happen. But if we get lucky, okay, if we get super lucky and the dollar index just starts dumping right now, then we get an instant Bitcoin rally. Then forget all the trend lines. All the trend lines are suddenly not important anymore, and Bitcoin will go into a rally right now. But I wouldn't count on it because I don't think the situation in Ukraine is going to change very soon. So more people will flock into the dollar. Stronger dollar means the dollar index will rise. The Fed is also continuing to raise the interest rates. So it's not looking currently as if a huge Bitcoin rally would take place. Let's go back to Bitcoin a final time. This is what I have drawn now for Bitcoin. If we look back at this thing here. So what could happen, we go down again and retest the long-term moving averages. We retest the lows of this super long-term trend channel that has been active since 2010, right? We go here, we rebound, and then by the end of the year or early next year, we get the next phase in the bull cycle, because it appears that the classic cycles don't exist anymore, okay? It's been given now, it's being dominated now more and more by the dollar index and by the stock market, and Bitcoin is being less and less dominated by retail investors and by the Bitcoin halvings. The halvings play less of an important role, and the cycles are dictated more and more by the behavior of the dollar index. I wish it wasn't so. I am just observing, friends, because I'm in this market since, believe it or not, 2013, right? That's where I started with Bitcoin. I remember it. It was in August, September 2013 when Bitcoin was trading at around $120. And since then, I still remember the behavior of Bitcoin back then. It was very, very different from nowadays. Bitcoin behaved very differently back then, very differently. Now it's really being dominated more and more by dollar index, by big institutional investors, by smart money, and not so much by retail investors anymore. And that's why we see this change of behavior. I want to say one more thing about the long-term trend channels. That is something which is important to me. The long-term trend channels, you will see different YouTubers or different people use different trend channels, okay? I have this one here, but there are people also using this one here. What is the difference? The difference is that this one here is much more conservative in that it actually says that this top here, these things here, were representing the higher band of this channel, which I personally don't quite agree on, okay? This is why I don't use this channel. It's also falling out of line here. If you see that here it was pretty much out of the band, and it also, in my opinion, does not fully take into account the 2013 cycle. It didn't quite reach up here. So, you know, everyone will use his or her own regression band. They all look a bit different. Some, in my opinion, are more realistic, but nobody knows it, and we will only know in hindsight which was the best one. And if we look at this one, in my opinion, it severely underestimates future Bitcoin price development, right? Look at this here. If we really say that this here was a legitimate top, then we will have like crazy low prices for Bitcoin for the next years, which I personally think is a bit is not so realistic. Because look at this here. In 2025 or early 2026, we would have an upper bound of $200,000. Are you kidding me? In 2026, an upper bound of $200,000, that is very, very conservative. That is ultra conservative. So this here, I will call it the ultra conservative regression band. And I'm using this one, which in my opinion is the more realistic one. Why? Because first of all, it perfectly fits all the peaks. Look at this. Perfectly fits all the peaks, and all the lows are also within the bounds. All the lows are within the bounds. And this here actually should have been, in my opinion, a blow off top. We should have reached 100K or 110K or whatever here around this area, right? We should have done something like this, but it didn't happen. Why? Because Bitcoin is being dominated more and more by retail investors, okay? That is why. So I think this thing here should not be taken, these tops should not be taken as they are, but normally we should have seen blow-off tops. That's what should have happened, but we didn't. So I personally don't like to weigh this here, this cycle, the same way that I weighed the other ones. So therefore, the logarithmic regression band I use is for the future more optimistic. That means that in 2026, we would see a lowest possible price of 160,000 and the highest possible price of 900 something thousand, right? We will see which one is the correct one, okay? We don't know this yet. We don't know. And it will be shown in the future. And until then, everyone will have more conservative or more aggressive kind of logarithmic regression channels. That's what I wanted to say concerning the channel. Another thing that I wanted to say before I forget it, the RSI, if you look at the weekly RSI, we are now nearing very low levels. Okay, we are now sitting at 39, and we were only here lower in the COVID low in March 20 at 33, and then at 28 in December 18, and here in January 15 we were at 27, or was it 20? At 28. Okay, and then another low at 34 in November 2011, right? So these are the lowest lows of the RSI, and we are now at 39. This means we are now nearing super insane oversold levels on the RSI, and we should keep a lookout on the RSI as to when this reaches again this area, where it will be very interesting as an entry point, in my opinion, if we get to around 33 to 28, right? If we go below 33 and even below 30, then this is a very good time to enter the market. If this should really happen now that this support line is breaking and we are going down, it is still not 100% decided, but it looks like it. And let's always assume the worst case, because if we assume the worst case, then we are mentally prepared if suddenly a miracle happens and Bitcoin starts pumping next week and the dollar index starts falling and woo, the rally is back on again. If that happens, awesome. But if not, we should really think about the worst case scenario. And this is, as I said, a drop to the MA 290, rebound, then we stay flat for the rest of the year. And then only early next year will we go into the next bull run. Because as I said, the classic bull cycles, they don't exist anymore. If this theory with the dollar index is true, if Bitcoin is really more and more dominated by the dollar index, and if the dollar index now continues pumping, friends, then the classic cycles, they don't exist anymore. They are gone. They are gone. Bitcoin will just be anti-correlated to the dollar index and correlated positively to the stock market. And that's it. That will be Bitcoin's behavior. So don't expect any classic cycles as we used to have them. Bitcoin has changed its behavior, and right now we should really go with the mindset that we could revisit the MA200 and MA290, so we could see prices in the most extreme case of $17,000 or $18,000. But as we said, the dollar index will dump sooner or later. Even if the dollar index is in a huge mega cycle and will pump to 120 in the next 5 or 10 years, we will see intermediate dumps in the dollar index, and these dumps will then trigger a Bitcoin rally. It will come, the next Bitcoin rally. It's just a matter of when, not a matter of if, friends. These are my current thoughts. I will keep you updated if I have some new ideas, because I have a lot of ideas. I think about coins too much, but I want to share with you my thoughts, and they might change, by the way. I'm not one of those people who I'm saying one thing and I will always have this opinion. So if I make a mistake, by the way, and if my opinion turns out to be wrong, I will also say it. I will say, okay, friends, look, I was wrong. I didn't expect this or that to happen. For example, I couldn't foresee the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine, this had implications now on the dollar index, right? It has implications. The dollar is pumping now even more because of this war. This was an event which could not have been foreseen. So this will have implications now on Bitcoin. And even though I always said that Bitcoin is looking like it did a running flat correction, right? It looked like it was doing a running flat, and we even had a hidden bullish divergence. It appears that this is not a strong enough case for a bull run to happen. It appears that Bitcoin wants to break down further, and these are my current thoughts, friends. Not everything is lost. If we go down to these levels and bounce and see a run in 2023, this here will be a super awesome entry point when the RSI goes down to around 30 or 28, like this, right? The RSI doesn't have to go down too much anymore. In May or late May or early June, we could already be at such low levels in the RSI, and that then probably will be the bottom for a long time to come. So friends, I hope you enjoyed these thoughts, these weird ramblings of a weird Bitcoin berserk who thinks too much about coins. If you like this video, please subscribe to this channel. You might even want to like this video. I would be extremely happy if you would like this video. I would be very happy. This would help this channel out. We could spread the word further to more people, because you know how the YouTube algorithm is. The YouTube algorithm is an ass. Let's be realistic. It's not a friendly algorithm. So it would really help me if you would smash the like button like crazy. And friends, I hope you have a nice rest of the day, even if Bitcoin will dump, because always remember, the next pump in Bitcoin is guaranteed. It's a matter of when and not if. Friends, have a nice day and see you in the next video.